Hi, I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, a reprieve for customers of one major insurance company in California. And we continue our in-depth look at the candidates for San Diego mayor. Tonight, a talk with Councilman David Alvarez.
Plus, a new program to support caregivers to military family members, how it differs from other caregiver services. I'm Peggy Pico with that story and our in-depth look into home stretch strategies and poll numbers for San Diego's top mayoral candidates.
Also tonight, new research on surgical solutions to teenage obesity. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Blue Shield of California says it will hold off canceling more than 100,000 health insurance policies affected by the new federal health care law. It was set to cancel individual and family policies on December 31st, but the state's insurance commissioner says the move gives customers only 90 days notice when they're supposed to get 6 months notice. Blue Shield agreed to let customers keep their existing policies through March. Critics of the Affordable Care Act have seized on policy cancellations as another flaw in the law's troubled rollout. A senior government official says problems with the website are being ironed out, but she would not say today if the White House supports a bill to let folks retain their existing coverage.
If you like your plan, you can keep it, and you don't have to change a thing due to the health care law. That's the White House website. Those are the president's words in 2009. So why don't we put those words into law?
I have not even looked at Senator Johnson's bill. I'm happy to look at any.
Well, I'll get a copy to you.
House Republicans plan a vote on the bill as early as next week. At the White House, President Obama was focused on another priority, immigration reform. He met with business leaders in an effort to push the House into taking action.
We know that the Senate bipartisan bill that already passed would grow the economy by $1.4 trillion, above and beyond the growth that's already taken place. We know it'll reduce our deficit by $850 billion. This is not, these aren't my estimates, these are independent estimates that have been made about the salutary effect that comprehensive immigration reform will have on our economy.
The president says immigration reform is supported by liberals and conservatives, and he believes a bill can be passed by the end of the year. Border Patrol is rejecting a recommendation tonight about the use of deadly force. The agency's policies have been under review since last year. The panel conducting the review says agents should stop using deadly force against people who throw rocks at them. It's one of the most common types of attacks against Border Patrol agents, but the agency says limiting use of force in those cases could put agents in danger. San Diego City Council's voted to raise a fee for developers to help pay for more affordable housing here. The fee links the gap between low incomes and the cost of housing in San Diego. It puts the fee at 1.5% of total building costs for projects. Critics say it will kill jobs and drive away businesses. The council vote is not the final word on the fee. Some issues with the proposal's language must be worked out, and 2 more votes are planned. 3 environmental groups plan a lawsuit to stop construction of a 430-home development near Santee. The Castle Rock project is under fire tonight over concerns about its impact on the area. Environmentalists say the plan doesn't do enough to protect natural habitat and endangered species. They're also concerned about the risk of wildfire. The builder, Party Homes, is not commenting on the lawsuit. San Diego Councilman David Alvarez is running for mayor as the progressive candidate, the one who could carry on the policies of disgraced former mayor Bob Filner. In our continuing series on the candidates for mayor, KPBS Metro reporter Sandia Dirks takes a closer look at the politics and story of Alvarez.
I'm going to allow for Q&A.
David Alvarez is hitting the campaign trail hard. It's 10 on a Saturday morning, but it's already Alvarez's 3rd stop. He's at the La Jolla Country Day School, sharing his story.
I was the first one in my family to graduate from high school and go to college, actually the only one to do that.
The 33-year-old from Barrio Logan talks frankly about the culture clash of being a first-generation immigrant and the toll it took on his family, particularly older brothers caught up in the maelstrom of the war on drugs.
My siblings, because of that culture clash, I believe, had to find some way to fit in. And oftentimes the only way to fit in that neighborhood was to be part of some of the youth gang activity that was going on.
He says now his brothers have made good. They work on the shipyards, provide for their families. But it is Alvarez's story of growing up in low-income, mostly Latino Barrio Logan, and then making it to college, let alone through high school, and then eventually to a seat on city council that has a clear impact on some in the crowd, like Eddie Baca.
What an inspirational story. It was great to hear that personally from you. And especially to see somebody from our neck of the woods.
Yeah.
You know, we were there when Vargas was first starting.
Right,
My mom worked
in the
on
90s,
campaigns for him.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But anyway, I would like to get involved in supporting you.
Okay.
So where do I begin?
One place it begins is at Alvarez's campaign headquarters on Claremont Mesa Boulevard. Here, campaign volunteers cold call, trying to get out the vote. And Alvarez stops by to do his part.
This is David Alvarez. I'm a council member from San Diego. And I'm running for mayor of San Diego.
Alvarez's beginnings as a kid from the barrio is key to his appeal and getting out the South of 8 vote. Immigrants, African Americans, and progressives, their votes can make or break his chance of winning, according to UCSD political scientist Steve Erie.
But in terms of the rocket to stardom, the very short tenure, the lightning speed, and seizing the moment when many people thought it wasn't his turn. It was too early, and he was only doing it for northern and southern exposure.
His exposure goes far beyond the far edges of San Diego these days. Erie says as a young progressive backed by a lot of union money, Alvarez may be the future of San Diego politics. But
the question is, can organized labor get out the vote? The minority vote, the youth vote, the vote of the disaffected. In other words, the Filner Coalition, including students.
Organized labor, especially the San Diego and Imperial Counties Labor Council, have rallied around Alvarez in this election, putting aside past tensions to go all in on the candidate. The reason, according to UFCW President Mickey Kasparian, is that progressives got their hearts broken by the phenomenal failures of Bob Filner. Now, they want to find somebody to carry on the progressive legacy, and they see Alvarez as the right man for the job. But political scientist Steve Erie says in the past, Alvarez has never really been labor or anybody's guy.
And he was willing, right, to buck labor. You know, there's a real independent streak. Now, but the other thing is, in terms of the Labor Council, you know, there were those who wanted, right, the endorsement for Nathan Fletcher.
Those like Lorena Gonzalez, the face of labor here, before ascending to the state Senate. She's supporting newly minted Democrat Nathan Fletcher. So even among Democrats, Erie says, there's something of a house divided. As for Alvarez, he doesn't see himself as picking up Filner's torch. He says he was already holding it.
That mantra of neighborhoods first was something that I carried. You look at the votes that I've taken, that was the mantra that I had, and then it was adopted by Filner, and then now everybody's talking about it.
As for any concerns that labor money might sully Alvarez's hard-sought reputation as a grassroots independent, he says he made a pledge to himself.
That pledge was that I would not change who I was, that I would be able to go to sleep at night knowing that decisions I made were the best decisions based on the information that I had, and that I wasn't going to change the character, my character, for anything or anyone.
He says if elected, even with money from the Labor Council, he'll still feel free to disagree with them. After we talk, Alvarez brings in his sleeping daughter from the car. It's her bedtime. For the councilman, there's yet another campaign event. Sandhya Dirks, KPBS News.
We are now 2 weeks away from the special election for San Diego mayor, and a recent poll shows a shift in the race for Republican candidate Kevin Faulconer. Peggy Pico explains what the poll says about the candidate and the race.
The recent poll conducted by 10 News and UT San Diego found 41% of those polled would vote for Republican Kevin Faulconer, 28% for Nathan Fletcher, 17% for David Alvarez, and 7% for Micah Geary, with another combined 7% other or undecided. Here to talk about the tactics emerging just 2 weeks out from the election is Mesa College political science professor Carl Luna. Welcome back, Carl.
Good to be here.
Now, what is your take on these poll numbers in terms of how this campaign is changing?
It's kind of the Nathan Fletcher Can't Buy Me Love campaign. He started out ahead. He's been attacked from both sides, painted as too liberal or too conservative for the respective bases. And Kevin Faulconer's basically picked up his support in terms of moderate Republicans and independents. Kevin Faulconer's now outpolling Nathan Fletcher with independents.
How about Alvarez? Has he been pretty much the same?
No matter what he does, he's staying under 20%, kind of like Carl DeMaio, tethered to a 30% through much of the last election. His real hope for Mr. Alvarez is that he can get a big Democratic turnout on election day to counter the fact he's behind in the polls.
Now, many political observers are predicting a runoff, and I believe there's one scheduled for mid-February, around February 11th. Historically, who tends to benefit most from runoff elections?
Well, runoff in an off year when you have limited attention, if it's near Valentine's Day and the rest that same week, it helps Republicans. It helps conservative, older voters, people who will vote by mail, and that's more and more people are doing it, but older voters do it more regularly, religiously. Kevin Faulconer gets an advantage in that, and what will probably be a very low turnout event.
Personal stories are now kind of rising to the surface. Of course, we've heard from David Alvarez and growing up and having to stay in a car and his stint with homelessness. And now Nathan Fletcher, it's come out that he's talked about some abuse in his childhood. What effect do stories like these, if any, do they have on voters?
They have an effect on the margin. It's the log cabin story, the creation story, where you try to establish an identity. You can make connection with voters who feel like they have some common purpose with you, but that tends to fall behind ideology, partisan affiliation, and in a short election, pretty much the candidate you were on opening day with just weeks to run this election is the candidate that's in most people's minds at the end of the election.
How about the candidates that I've spoken to, they all seem to be running on the same platforms, neighborhood focus, infrastructure repairs, police, jobs, pretty much the same kind of just in different orders. Is there anything that really differentiates these top candidates that you've seen?
Well, there will be difference in practical political approaches. Mr. Alvarez will be more pro-unions, less looking for outsourcing of work. Mr. Faulconer's running on being a fiscal responsibly conservative. Nathan Fletcher positioning himself in the middle. The simple reality is whoever wins, it'll stay a 5-4 Democrat-controlled council. You still have fiscal constraints and realities. The big thing the candidates are doing is running on the positive side of the Faulconer legacy, which is move toward the neighborhoods a bit, maintain and restore basic services, and not be Bob Filner. This is the I'm not Bob Filner campaign.
Okay. What do you think is going through the candidates' minds right now? What are they saying?
With 2 weeks to go, it's don't screw up. If you screw up any time between now and the election, you don't have time to really walk it back, and that'll affect late-breaking voters. For Kevin Faulconer, it's full steam ahead. For Mr. Alvarez, it may be a Hail Mary to try to get the votes back. And for Nathan Fletcher, he's got one last week or so to try to connect with moderate voters to turn them out to the polls to say, I'm your guy in the middle.
How about mistakes? Have you seen any big mistakes, or any mistakes, I should say, these candidates have made in this short election?
I think the Fletcher campaign thought they had the best chance to make it to the runoff, over Mr. Alvarez, which they probably were right at the beginning. They weren't aggressive enough to get a clearly defined Nathan Fletcher candidacy from the get-go. Kevin Faulconer's run a very straight down the road, kind of bland campaign. Meanwhile, the independent committees have done the bad cop work of painting basically Nathan Fletcher as the guy you don't want to vote for.
How about the city council? I'll have to end it on this as far as, how will this change the makeup? You mentioned it's still going to be 5-4.
If Kevin Faulconer becomes the acting mayor, or becomes the mayor, probably, as I read the charter, you'll appoint somebody to his seat until the 2014 election cycle. His seat possibly could swing in 2014. Mr. Alvarez's seat's going to stay solidly Democrat.
All right, political science professor Carl Luna, thanks so much.
Thank you.
You can find all of our coverage of this special election for mayor online at kpbs.org/election. A petition drive for term limits could be getting underway soon in La Mesa. The proposal would limit the mayor and city council there to 12 consecutive years. They'd have to take a 4-year break before they could run again. The La Mesa Term Limits Committee has filed paperwork to start a petition drive to get the measure on the November ballot next year. Californians don't vote for governor, of course, until next year, but today, Republican State Assemblyman Tim Donnelly announced he's running. Donnelly says the state needs a governor who will put public safety first and stop telling folks what to do. Former Lieutenant Governor Abel Maldonado is also running, and Governor Jerry Brown, who will be 76 next year, is also expected to say he'll run for re-election. County supervisors are looking into regulating electronic cigarette use under its anti-tobacco policy. Staffers have 90 days to study the devices and existing policy. Supervisor Dave Roberts says he's worried e-cigarettes will undermine the county's anti-smoking message. Supervisor Bill Horn was the only one to vote against the measure. He says there's no evidence young folks will switch from e-cigarettes to tobacco. The county's adoption program is getting streamlined to make it more efficient. Supervisors say the program needs to better incorporate new technology. The county plans to create focus groups to analyze the program, establish an adoption ombudsman, and rebrand foster care. Advocates for the homeless are gearing up for the 8th annual Project Homeless Connect downtown. Today, some city leaders kicked off the preparations. They're looking for blankets, gently used clothing, and hundreds of volunteers. Last year, more than 1,100 people were served at the one-day resource fair.
Nearly 70% were between the ages of 41 and 70. More than half had a medical condition or a disability. 81.5% were single adults, and this is troubling, 17% were military veterans.
Besides clothes and blankets, the fair will also offer health exams, haircuts, and identification cards. It's happening December 4th at the San Diego Concourse downtown. Right now, donations are being accepted at Housing Commission offices and at the City Administration Building downtown. There's a new program in San Diego to help military caregivers. Peggy Pico explains how the support program works.
San Diego's longtime Southern Caregiver Resource Center recently launched Operation Family Caregiver, a program to help caregivers of injured military family members who served in recent conflicts in the Middle East. Here with details are Lori Van Tilburg with the SCRC and Jessica Bly, who spent 2 years as a caregiver to her injured husband. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lori, what specific types of help does Operation Family Caregiver provide?
Operation Family Caregiver is twofold. First, it's an education outreach program to educate the community about the needs of family caregivers caring for folks with traumatic brain injury and PTSD coming back from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so we do a lot of education and training in the community about the needs of family caregivers, about traumatic brain injury, and about PTSD so people can understand what that entails. Second part of it is the evidence-based intervention that's funded under the Rosalind Carter Institute to really work with families specifically on their problems. It's a problem-solving method that we are really there to help coach families on their specific problems to help them develop solutions that will fit the needs of their family.
In the evidence-based part of that's sort of is that sort of it's something that you document? What does the evidence-based mean?
See, that's a very specific program that was tested in a controlled environment. So it's gone through rigorous scientific evaluation that they've really looked at the outcomes to determine that they're effective. And so it's done in a controlled environment. And then really for us, it's put into practice. So we take that research-based intervention and then we actually implement that in the community within our organization.
I see. Now, Jessica, your husband Tim was severely injured when a 240-pound IED, I understand, exploded under his vehicle in his deployment in Afghanistan in 2011. What were his injuries?
He had 2 fractured femurs, a broken foot, 3 vertebrae
right?
fractures, a TBI, and PTSD.
So he came back a different man, both physically and mentally, it would seem. And your role expanded from a wife to a caregiver. How did this impact you and your family?
It completely changed the dynamics of our family. It changed how we lived our life. We lived in Fisher houses for a few months before we came to San Diego and received a home, so it was a big change.
And it impacted your dynamics with your friends and going out, and tell me about that.
Yeah, there was no more going out. It was I'd put my kids in childcare, and I'd go see my husband in the hospital, and we'd work on some of his recovery or some of his therapies that he was supposed to be doing. And I lived in a Fisher house for a little while, and until we got to San Diego, we didn't really have a house.
Did you feel supported? Did you know about the support, or did you kind of feel alone? What was going on there?
For the first year, I probably felt pretty alone. It was a new experience, and I had a hard time relating to people. I probably became a little introverted for a good while. I had a hard time coming out and talking to people, or I just wanted to be alone a lot.
Well, we're going to talk about how that's changed, but Lori, I did want to get to this. How do the needs of a military caregiver like Jessica, somebody who's caring for somebody who was in the military, differ from, let's say, other caregivers, somebody caring for a parent with Alzheimer's?
I think that the needs of the military caregiver are, exaggerated a lot by the stress that they're feeling because of the fact that they're in that military culture where reaching out for help and support is often frowned upon. It's like they want to get back to their team members back in the war. They don't want to admit that they have post-traumatic stress disorder or a traumatic brain injury. And so there's a lot of isolation. I think that Jessica has indicated that, reaching out is something that's very, very hard to do. And I think for them, they're a lot younger. They may be newly married. They have young children. They may not have a work history, so there are financial issues, there's housing issues, there's childcare issues. There are many, many issues that, families that have had more life experience don't have, if you're dealing with somebody that has, let's say, Alzheimer's disease.
Something that needs to be specifically addressed, it sounds like. Now, Jessica, how are you and Tim doing right now? I understand there's been quite a bit of progress.
We're doing really good. He finished up 2 years of recovery, and he got to stay in the military, and he's furthering his corpsman training and finishing up independent duty corpsman school. So he's doing phenomenal.
He's back at school. He's in the military.
In the military, he's getting to do everything that he loved doing.
Alrighty. Well, Jessica, thank you for sharing your story, and Lori, thank you so much for telling us about this new program.
Thank you.
I'm Gwen Eiffel on the next news hour. One Seattle suburb wants to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. That's Tuesday on the PBS NewsHour.
Some new research is lending support for surgical treatments for obese teenagers. The story from Matt Friedman of the Associated Press.
Results of a new study released Monday show obesity surgery is generally safe for teens. The government-funded study involved 242 U.S. teens. It found obese teenagers have a startling number of health problems that were once seen only in adults. Dr. Thomas Inge of Cincinnati Children's Hospital authored the study.
What the surgery does is induces weight loss. It also induces a major change in the diet. And we believe that the effects that we see on health are a result of these effects on intake as well as weight loss.
Participants had either gastric sleeve or gastric bypass surgery and were followed for the first several weeks after surgery. The results suggest teens may do better than adults after obesity surgery. Dustin Holston once weighed 366 pounds and couldn't walk across a parking lot to the grocery store. Prior to surgery, Dustin was diagnosed with an enlarged heart, signs of diabetes, and other dangerous medical conditions.
My heart condition is under control. The signs of diabetes and fatty liver disease are gone. The hyperthyroidism and sleep apnea are gone.
Sydney Younger also underwent surgery. Like Dustin, her overall health condition was poor, with prediabetes and other initial stage medical complications.
My weight loss changed my health condition so much. I can go up and down stairs without being out of breath.
The American Heart Association said the surgery should only be considered for those with severe obesity who are psychologically mature enough to handle it.
I can look in the mirror and think that I'm beautiful.
Whether obesity surgery results in lasting weight loss remains to be seen as researchers continue to follow the participants. Matt Friedman, Associated Press.
Looks like high pressure is going to warm up things at the beaches over the next few days with a nice mix of sun and clouds. Temperatures in the upper 70s, cooler by Friday. The Inland Valley will see sunshine for most of the week. And with temperatures in the 80s, mountain areas will be cooler but sunny. Temperatures mostly in the 60s there. And in the desert, mostly sunny with highs in the 80s. Recapping tonight's top stories, Blue Shield of California says it will hold off on canceling more than 100,000 health insurance policies affected by the new federal health care law. The company was planning to cancel individual and family policies on December 31st, but the state's insurance commissioner says the move gives customers only 90 days notice when they're supposed to, by law, get 6 months. Blue Shield agreed to let customers keep their existing policies through March. Border Patrol is rejecting a recommendation about the use of deadly force. The agency's policies have been under review since last year. The panel conducting the review says agents should stop using deadly force against people who throw rocks at them. It is one of the most common type of attacks against border agents, but the agency says limiting use of force in those cases could put agents in danger. You can find tonight's stories and download the KPBS app all on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Good night.